Hello dear students, in this video we are going to discuss one of the most important topics, that is hemodynamics of circulation. This topic, a little bit of understanding of the physical laws is important, formulas are important, and sometimes you will get some of the short notes also. As such, a little bit difficult side I would say, but try to listen so that it makes easier for you. So let's get into the topic, hemodynamics of circulation. So what is hemodynamics? It is nothing but these are the physical laws of blood flow. Just like we have the physical laws, these are the dynamics or the laws of the blood flow through which the blood vessels. So whenever the blood is flowing through the blood vessels, some of the laws are governing this blood flow. That is called as the hemodynamics. And it gives the relationship between blood flow, pressure and resistance. And it is very similar to the Ohm's law, which relates the interchanging relationship between the current, electromotive force and the resistance. All of you must be knowing that Ohm's law is nothing but current is equal to electromotive force by resistance. You must have read it like V is equal to IR. So V is nothing but the voltage and I is nothing but the current and R is the resistance. So when you convert it, I comes this side. So the current is equal to V by R, which is the electromotive force upon resistance. So this is the formula given. In a similar manner, in a very similar manner, just like the current flow, the blood flow is also equivalent to the flow force upon resistance. So force upon resistance, or this force is also called as pressure upon resistance. So the force here is the pressure and resistance is the total peripheral resistance given by the blood vessels. So pressure upon resistance is equal to the blood flow. Try to remember this formula. We will try to come back on a later slide also. So next, coming to some of the few laws which govern the blood flow. So this will be our discussion point of view. So what is the difference between a blood flow and a normal fluid flow? First thing is, the fluid, whenever it is flowing through it, it is a rigid tube. But blood vessels are not rigid, so that is one major difference. Second thing is, it is not a perfect liquid also, because it will have so many blood formed elements as the cells also. So these are some differences, but still some of the physical laws applies and it works very similar to the normal fluid flowing through a rigid tube. So the laws that we are going to study today are Reynolds number, then gene activation by the shear stress, and Poiseuille-Hagen formula, then Ferris-Lindquist effect and Laplace law. There are numerous laws, but these are the most important ones, so we will be sticking on to these important ones. So first, coming to the Reynolds number. So as you can see from this image, there are two images we have put. Which one will have a larger sound? When the water is flowing through point A, or when the water is flowing through this type of structure, point B. Most of you know that when there are some hindrances or obstructions, what is going to happen? It is going to create a turbulence and it is going to create a noise. So this is going to create a noise, I can say it is going to create some kind of sound. So this is the turbulent flow, whereas this type of streamlined flow is called as laminar flow. And this difference is given with the help of Reynolds number. So let's try to understand the concept. Laminar flow. The flow is laminar or it is linear up to a critical velocity. Beyond that velocity, when the velocity increases, what is going to happen? It is going to create a turbulence which might be heard as a sound. So as you can see here, this is the vessel wall and the fluid or the system is flowing through it in a streamlined pattern, in a laminar pattern. So this is called as a laminar flow. And this flow is determined by the number Reynolds number. The beauty about Reynolds number is it does not have units, because the numerator and the denominator have similar units. So it does not have any units. So what is the formula for Reynolds number? It is rho V d upon eta. What is rho? Rho is nothing but the density of the fluid. V is the velocity, which is the most important component. As and when the velocity increases, as you can see here, both of them are numerator, the Reynolds number also will increase. Then the diameter of the tube. Finally, the viscosity of the fluid. If the fluid is viscous, it is not going to create much turbulence. That is why it is in the denominator. Rest of the factors like density, velocity and diameter will help to create the turbulence. When the Reynolds number is less than 2000, what is going to happen? The flow is going to be laminar. When the Reynolds number is more than 3000, then it is going to be turbulent. And this turbulence nature will help us to understand some of the physiological process and pathological process also. So for example, whenever there is a constriction in an artery also, whenever there is a constriction, what is going to happen? There is going to be an increase in velocity. So after the constriction, what is going to happen? Suppose we constrict this part of the artery. Suppose we create a constriction in the artery like this. And you're trying to obstruct it, or some pathological changes are happening which are obstructing it. Because of it, what is going to happen? The blood is going to be ejected through this narrow space at a high velocity. So beyond constriction, there is going to be creation of turbulence. The turbulence is going to increase and it is going to be a turbulent flow. How does this help us? It helps us to understand some of the processes. The most common one which you do routinely in your clinical experiments also, you will try to obstruct an artery and release it in one experiment, and you will try to hear the sound. And that sound is nothing but the Korsakoff sounds. Where do we do it? We do it for the blood pressure measurements. What do? We try to constrict the artery and try to release it. That creates high velocity flow and a turbulent nature, and you will hear the sound while recording the blood pressure. And sometimes whenever there is a natural constriction in the aorta or in any other artery, we can hear it through the stethoscope. So ascending artery, aorta constriction, or carotid bruits, whenever you put the stethoscope in an obstructed carotid, there also you will hear the noise, carotid bruit, or branching points in the arteries. These are places where there is high chances of creation of a turbulence number, wherein the Reynolds number goes beyond 3000. And in between 2000 and 3000, it depends on some other factors. Sometimes it might be laminar, sometimes it might be turbulent. So this is all about Reynolds number. Next, coming to the shear stress. So whenever any blood flow is going, it is going to create a force on the endothelium. And this force is called as shear stress, which is nothing but it is equivalent to the viscosity and shear rate. This shear stress, if it is constantly happening, suppose for example, there is a vessel which is deviating like this, and in one of it there is some obstruction. So what is going to happen? The shear stress is going to increase and increase. When this shear stress is increasing and increasing, there is activation of growth factors like vascular endothelial growth factor. What they are going to do is, they are going to create the process of developing new vessels, which is called as angiogenesis. So this is important. Some of the physiological processes wherein angiogenesis happens is, suppose one of the artery, let's say it is some of the arteries are supplying the cardiac tissue and one of the arteries is getting blocked. The person will not have symptoms immediately. There will be collateral formation which happens because of this block. How the collaterals are getting formed? Because there is a shear stress which is happening, which is activating the growth factor and causing the angiogenesis. So this collaterals will help the patient to survive for a little longer, but again it will not be a vessel which is having more caliber. So ultimately the original vessel has to be thrombolized or it has to be replaced. So that is the shear stress and gene activation. Next, coming to Poiseuille-Hagen formula. This you might have read it in your physics classes also. It gives the relationship between flow, viscosity and radius of the tube. So here flow is nothing but PA minus PB pi r squared by 8 eta L. So let's try to expand the formula. PA minus PB is pressure difference across the tube. If the pressure difference is more, for example, here the pressure is just 5, on the other side the pressure is 15, the flow will be faster. In a similar way, suppose the pressure is 10 and the other side is having 9, the flow will be slower because the pressure difference will help to increase the flow. So that is pressure difference, and eta is viscosity, and r is the radius of the tube, and L is the length of the tube. So as you can understand here, the flow is directly proportional to the radius. It's pretty simple. If the vessel caliber is more and more, what is going to happen? The flow is going to be more, and obviously the diameter is increasing, the flow will also increase. But length, if the length is more, the flow will be decreased. So flow, as you can write it down here, it is directly proportional to r power 4. Next, all of us study the formula that flow is nothing but the formula is pressure upon resistance. At the start of the session, I told you to remember this. The flow is nothing but pressure upon resistance. So if you substitute pressure upon resistance and pressure on this side, pi r squared by 8 eta L, the pressure on both sides gets cancelled, and 1 by r, 1 by resistance becomes pi r power 4 by 8 eta L. So if you reverse that, the resistance will become inversely proportional to the radius. It's pretty logical. When the radius is smaller, what is going to happen to the resistance? The resistance is going to increase. If the radius is bigger, what is going to happen? The resistance is going to fall, and it falls or increases up to the power of 4. For one simple example, if the radius is doubled, what is going to happen? The resistance is going to decrease by 16 times. So R is inversely proportional to the, if it is doubled, what is going to happen? R to the power of 4, that will become R is inversely proportional to 16. In a similar manner, if the radius is doubled, what is going to happen? The flow is going to increase, whereas the resistance is going to decrease. If the radius is halved, suppose for example, we are reducing the radius to half, R is inversely proportional. Now I am saying it is going to be 1 by 2. So what will happen to the resistance? The resistance is going to increase by 16 times. So the radius is one important parameter which will determine the blood flow and the resistance. So same written here, if the radius is halved, the resistance increases by 16 times. If it is doubled, it decreases by 16 times. If you have to double the flow, the radius has to be just increased 20%. If you increase the radius 20%, the blood flow is going to be doubled. So that's how the vasodilatory process will help during states like exercise. There is going to be an increase in vessel radius and the blood flow is going to increase to that particular tissue. Now coming to the last formula, last but one I guess. So viscosity depends on hematocrit. This is very, very important. In larger vessels, what is going to happen? Whenever the viscosity is there, it will be increased by the hematocrit, or we can say that increase in packed cell volume increases viscosity. This is logical. Suppose for example, somebody is having polycythemia, what is going to happen to his viscosity? His viscosity is going to increase. But the catch here is, it increases only in the larger vessels. What happens in the smaller vessels? In the smaller vessels also, ideally we will think that it increases, but not that much. It does not directly increase because the RBC flows in the center, creating a less viscosity, and the cell-free plasma moves in the periphery. Let's understand with the diagram, then it becomes easier. Suppose in a larger vessel, what is going to happen? When the RBC count is increasing, suppose let's take an example, like initially there were only 5 RBCs, now it has become 10. What is going to happen? The viscosity is going to increase. But in case of smaller vessels, suppose the vessel is smaller, what is going to happen is the RBCs are flowing in a single frame of line. So if I have 5 RBCs, it is going to go like this. If I have 10 also, it is going to go in a single stream of line. The flow might be reduced, but the viscosity overall contribution in a smaller vessel is very, very less, since the RBCs are going in a stream and the side, it is a cell-free plasma. The cell-free plasma moves in the side, so that reducing the viscosity. This beautiful effect is called as Ferris-Lindquist effect, and that is why sometimes the hematocrit has a very less effect on total peripheral resistance. Otherwise, what would happen? All the mountain people will have hypertension. It is not so like that. They might be slightly elevated because they have polycythemia, but it is not as much elevated like the expected thing. Why? Because they have a high hematocrit. High altitude people have a high hematocrit, but because of the Ferris-Lindquist effect, it is not increasing the total peripheral resistance to greater levels. So this is how they are prevented from having too much hypertension. Next, coming to the Laplace law. This is one of the famous laws. Most of you must be knowing this formula, that is pressure is equal to 2T by R. So the original formula is the tension in the wall of a cylinder is nothing but transmural pressure into radius upon wall thickness. So the transmural pressure is pressure inside minus outside. Generally the pressure outside is considered almost nil. So the transmural pressure is, we can just say pressure inside the wall. Then coming to the thickness of the wall thickness is also not that much for a consideration. So it is usually around 1 or less than 1. So it is also ignored in this formula. So it becomes tension is equal to pressure into radius. Or you might be reading the formula, that is pressure is equal to tension upon radius. So these are the two factors which is influencing the pressure generated. So if the tension is more, obviously the pressure will increase. If the radius is more, what is going to happen? The pressure is going to fall down. So let's see two conditions. What is going to happen? The smaller the radius, less tension needed to generate the pressure required. So if I have to keep the pressure constant, I have to manipulate the tension and the radius. So let's try to understand in a person. We will take an example of two people, how the patients with dilated cardiomyopathy are at a disadvantage. So first let's take a normal subject, and second we have a dilated cardiomyopathy. Many a times the dilation is completely harmful to the patient. Let's try to understand how. Because we know that pressure is equal to tension upon radius. Suppose this patient has to generate pressure 120 mm of Hg. So what is going to happen? There is going to be generation of tension and the radius is going to be same. In dilated cardiomyopathy, what has increased? The radius has increased because the heart is dilated. Now if I want to generate the same pressure, for example same 120 mm of Hg I have to generate, but what is happening is, since the radius is increased, the pressure has fallen. The radius has increased, the pressure is inversely proportional to the radius, so the pressure has fallen. So what I have to do to keep the same pressure? There is only one another way to keep the same pressure, that is we have to increase the tension also. So as you can see here, a dilated cardiomyopathy patient has to generate increased tension or develop more force to create the same pressure because its radius is increased. So this is very, very important. So that's the disadvantage. So same things are written here. The dilated heart must do more work than the non-dilated heart. But obviously it will not be able to do. That's why they are landing up in cardiac failure. And Laplace law is also seen in cystometrogram, which we will be studying in the renal system. There is one graph which is comparing between the pressure and the volume. So volume on the x-axis, that is the volume of the bladder, and pressure on the y-axis. And the graph goes like this. In that there is one phase which is called as phase 1b, which is flatter because of this Laplace law. We will try to do the renal system separately. So in that I will try to explain this cystometrogram graph also. And at the same time in the respiratory system also this Laplace law is applied because it is also a globular structure, and this Laplace law prevents the collapse of the alveoli with the help of surfactant. So lung and kidney are other two places wherein the Laplace law is applied. So I hope it's clear. So these are some of the physical laws you must know before giving an exam, and as you can see here, it has some clinical applications like in a patient of dilated cardiomyopathy or the Korsakoff sounds you hear. All those are based on the physical laws. So thank you for watching the video. If you have any further doubts, kindly drop in the comment section. I'll be happy to make a new video on it. Thank you so much.